Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give everybody a couple more minutes, like maybe a minute or two to join. We do have a lot of folks registered today, but welcome to Introduction to AI for Your Small Business. My name is Isabel Chrome. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about this topic with you all. So thank you for joining me on your lunch break or in the middle of your day. Really appreciate you taking the time. We have about 15 folks in the room already, which is great. Hope we're expecting, I think we had 160 odd registrations for this. So I'm going to give it a little more time for folks to join. You'll notice as you joined the webinar today that we are using the webinar setting, which means that you don't have the ability to come off mute and speak up, but I still would love your participation and your engagement in this webinar. I really want to make sure that we're giving you information that's relevant to you, that we're answering questions that you have along the way. So as a starting point, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to. You never know who else in this room, in this Zoom room might be a potential customer, a potential business partnership, just a useful contact. So I've put my name in the chat, but if you have, a website you want to share, a little bit about your business background, just your name, anything you want, put that in the chat. And as we go along today, if you have questions, there's a Q&A function that you can use. If you have comments, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be running a couple of polls along the way and doing some demos on generative AI. I would have loved to do a breakout room and do some small group work just to give you all like really hands-on experiences with these platforms and tools, but we are just a little bit too large of a group today to make that viable. So thank you all, everybody, for introducing yourself in the chat. I love to see it. Keep that coming. And again, while you are not able to come off mute and ask questions aloud, I do welcome your questions and your commentary along the way. Use that comment or that chat function, and feel free to drop any questions you have into the Q&A feature so that I see them. They might get lost in the chat because I'm really hoping for a kind of an active conversation. In previous webinars on this topic, we've had at least one person join who is, experienced and an expert in this space. And so it's often some great conversations going on in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're a couple minutes past the hour. My goal today is to have everybody done and wrapped up with this webinar right at that 1:30 timeframe where we've decided to end. If you're only able to join us for the first hour, that last half hour is where we're going to be doing kind of the demo and the hands-on stuff. So would love to have you the whole time, but understandable if you can only join us for an hour. We've factored that into our instructional design today. All right, so Introduction to AI for Your Small Business is what we're here to do. I am part of the Temple University Small Business Development Center. I'm a business consultant here at the SBDC. Temple University's SBDC is hosted by Temple's Fox School of Business, and we've been serving the small business communities of Philadelphia, Montgomery, and Lower Bucks County since 1983. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And some statistics just to, about kind of the national SBDC network. Our services help small businesses start every 26 minutes, helps a new job be formed every 5.7 minutes. So we do some really impactful work. Our SBDC does, we accomplish that mission of helping small businesses start and grow in a couple of key ways. Number one is our small business consulting, which is available at no cost to entrepreneurs in our service area and at no cost to entrepreneurs outside of our service area through other SBDCs. So here's some examples of topics that we work on in our one-on-one work. I am one of our business consultants. So if you are interested in working with the SBDC and you happen to be in Temple's service area, it's a chance you might work with me. And if you're interested in continuing conversation, I'll be sure to share my contact info. Of course, we also offer, webinars, training programs, tons of things that we're doing adding new programs all the time. Here's a little bit of info about me if you're curious. I've been with the SBDC since 2021. I've done a ton of different kinds of work with the SBDC. I came in focusing on the needs of startups. I've been an entrepreneur myself. I run a women's business center. And right now my focus with SBDC clients is on AI implementation, business model refinement, and I work with some of our technology companies on kind of product market fit, customer validation, and a lot of related concepts. So that's a little bit about who I am. Thank you all for all the instructions that you've given to yourself in the chat. If you've just joined us, I'm really hoping that you will, even though we are in a listen-only webinar setting here today, that you'll have an active chat and participate in the conversation. Really always interested in everyone's input. If I'm speaking too quickly, if I'm using a term you're not familiar with, if you just have a question about what I'm talking about, you can put it in the chat. If there's a lot of conversation back and forth, I might miss it. So if you have a particular question you want to make sure I answer, use the Q&A function in Zoom, which you'll find in your Zoom controls. And you'll be able to enter a question there, see other questions, and see also the answers to any question that has come through. And I welcome questions at any point. I don't find them to be disruptive at all. So, introduction to AI for a small business. Here are some of our objectives. I want to start off by making sure you understand what we're trying to accomplish here today. I want all of you to walk away with at least an understanding of what basically powers generative AI and some of the kind of technology and development behind it. We'll give a brief overview of that. I promise you don't have to be, a software developer or programmer or have any kind of technical knowledge to understand the history that I'm going to give today. It's going to be kind of non-technical. We are also going to identify risks around AI usage and learn how to manage those risks. So I want you to walk away with not just an understanding of what those risks are, but more importantly, how do you protect your business and your interests? And most importantly, I want you to leave with at least one viable use case for generative AI for your business that you could put into practice, today or tomorrow if you've got a busy afternoon. So that's my goal. I'd like to just launch a quick little poll. I'm curious to know how many folks here in the room are currently small business owners or currently operating a small business? No wrong answer here. Just curious, whether we have, small business owners, employees, pre-venture entrepreneurs. We welcome everybody here. No wrong answer. Just curious who's in the Zoom room today. I'll leave that poll up for another minute or two. We've got about half of you all have already responded, so thank you very much. And most of us are here as small business owners, which is great. That's who we're hoping to reach today. So hopefully we will be doing some work that looks familiar to you, that looks relevant and useful to you here today. Last chance for the poll answer. I'm going to close it up in 5, 4, 3. Okay, last call's in. All right, thanks everybody. And we are 78% small business owners in the room according to the poll, which is great. One more quick poll, if you'll indulge me. I'd love if you could just let me know where you all are in terms of your familiarity with AI. So if you are, a total novice here to learn all the way up to an expert, everybody's welcome. Bear in mind that we are focusing today on questions kind of on the lower end of the familiarity spectrum. So it is an introduction to generative AI. We are really focusing on folks who maybe aren't experts yet or haven't used generative AI as often. But if you are, so bear that in mind if you're coming in as an expert, that we may cover some ground you're familiar with, and that's, you're welcome to listen in, but just bear in mind that we might not be giving you brand new info. So leaving that up for another minute or two. We've got about 64% participation, which is not bad. I'd love if we could get it up into 70 or 80 for me. So if you haven't yet answered the poll, unless you're driving, don't click anything if you're driving. And then yeah, so can't answer the poll. Oh, you can't see the poll. That's interesting. That could be a security setting on your Zoom, or there's the Zoom installation you have in your machine might prevent you from viewing polls. It doesn't, you don't have to put it in the chat. If you don't see the poll to click on, don't worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this poll. Can I enable copy chat? I don't know if I can do that during the meeting. Unfortunately, I think that might be a setting I'd have to change in the event, and that's not something I'm able to do while I'm leading. I'm moderating and facilitating today, which is going to mean I'm a little limited in that kind of thing. Sorry about that. All right, wrapping up the poll. If you're curious who else is in the room, this is what we've got. We've got a nice mix. So a lot of folks who've experimented a little bit with generative AI, but so definitely some folks here who are more novices, and you're very welcome. You're in the right room. All right, so let's get into it. If you wouldn't mind raising your hand, which is a Zoom function you can use, or saying yes, thumbs up, thumbs down in the chat, who already has an account with a generative AI platform, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, et cetera, any of those large language models. Seeing a lot of hands raised. Lovely. Okay, that's good to know. All right, great news. All right, so later on, this is helpful later on because we're not able to do breakouts and small group work. If you'd like to follow along as we do some of the demos and we do a little bit of prompt engineering, feel free to log in those accounts and follow along. And I'll be curious to know if you get different outputs on different models. We're going to be using ChatGPT today just because that's what I've got easiest access to here at the SBDC. All right, awesome. So back to the topic at hand. Here's what we're doing. Introduction to AI for your small business. Okay, before we get into how this all works, this is a little bit of a joke. But I just want to make the case for why you should care about generative AI if you're not already convinced, and that's why you're here, right? I see a question in the chat. Yes, I'm going to share the slides. So why should you care? Well, here are some statistics that I found that are pretty recent. Most of these came from surveys that went out at the end of 2024. So this is, right around the turn of the year, where we were kind of state of the nation on AI usage. All basically Fortune 500 companies are using or experimenting with AI, the vast majority of them. Small business owners really are lagging behind that adoption. It's in corporate America, adoption is pretty ubiquitous. Among small businesses, 50% of small businesses surveyed are currently using AI. And I happen to think that number might be even overcounting based on, have some selection bias in the survey. 64% of small businesses that were surveyed plan to incorporate AI tools into their business in the next year. So plenty of folks who haven't used it are planning to do so in the coming year. Maybe some of you are in that group. And 75% of small businesses reported that having employees with AI skills could provide a competitive advantage, especially if you know that, half or more of small businesses aren't using these tools. If that's your competition, you can get an edge on them a little bit by leveraging AI tools to the best of your ability. 83% of executives see AI as a key strategic priority for their business right now, and they're not wrong. And so I want to kind of, again, make the case for why this is valuable and important. And what are we hearing from that 51% of small business owners who are already using AI? Well, most of them say that they saw sales growth, that they saw, sustained growth even in challenging conditions when you utilizing AI for marketing purposes. And we'll talk about what some of those, use cases might be. There's good research out there that suggests AI could boost small business productivity or individual productivity by up to 40% on across all kinds of tasks, which is massive. And small businesses that are already using AI, 82% of them report that AI will be crucial for their business and report positive outcomes from having used it already. So people are pretty happy with how they're using AI in their small business. And I think you might agree with them if you haven't already been experimenting. The most immediate productivity gain, I think, especially for micro enterprises, businesses 5 employees and under, comes from specifically generative AI's ability to compile and summarize data, which can really free up the operator to focus on creativity and decision making. Those of you who are already in business, which, as we've established, is most of you, can understand that there's very little in a small business that's more valuable than your time. So, that's a real, if that hasn't made the case, I don't know what to tell you, but thank you for being here. I think you're in the right room, and we'll get some interesting info out of this conversation. All right, so I'm going to start with a quick demo. Again, just to show you kind of what generative AI tools can do. This won't be we are going to get into the history and what they do, but would anybody want to throw into the chat, those of you who have experimented with AI already, what are some prompts that you've already used, that maybe a simple prompt you've used recently. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up a ChatGPT window so you can get a sense of what we're doing. If nobody wants to volunteer a prompt, I'll invent one. But just kind of want to show you. How about this? Somebody should throw out a kind of business. It could be your business, it could be a business that you're familiar with, but a kind of business, an industry. Quiet room winery. Okay, thank you very much, Luann. All right, so we're gonna think about a winery, and I'm gonna think about. I'm gonna go for a marketing plan for a refine the statement as a great prompt, a winery business. So I'm gonna ask generative AI, and I'm gonna do this using a pretty detailed prompt, and we'll talk later on about great prompts versus less great prompts. But let's say create a marketing strategy for a young winery in its first 5 years that is, oh, it's like I can spell, that is located in, I'm going to say central Pennsylvania, and targeting, maybe I'm gonna make up a target customer focus, targeting eco-conscious wine consumers across the eastern US. The winery has a website and is active on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Ask any questions needed to gather sufficient information for the output. All right, let's see what it gives us. I'm using the paid version of ChatGPT. You can get, you do get pretty similar outputs with the free version. They're a little bit less detailed, a little bit less quick. And people tell me DeepSeek is great as well. I've played with it a little bit, but I am using the paid version of ChatGPT. Before I craft the marketing strategies, remember I asked it to tell me more. Okay, so it's asking for some nice specific details. Okay, it's organic practices set and sustainable packaging, set it apart. Specializes in sweet red wine, sells through distributors, and is aiming for increased brand recognition. Content strategy so far has focused on production videos. And let's see what it gives us. Can you copy your prompts in chat? Yeah, you can come up here and copy this text, edit the prompt. Here's a 5-year marketing strategy, and it's breaking this out by year. Because I didn't give it a time frame. I could say, give me a marketing strategy for the next 6 months. I could say, give me, and let's see what it has. Okay, so content strategy. So objective, it's decided on an objective for us: building brand identity, refining brand message, content strategy enhancement, influencer collaborations, PR and media features, et cetera, et cetera. So some interesting stuff here. Okay, so let's say I like what I'm seeing, but now I need kind of more tactics. I might say, and it's still going. Okay, give me a content calendar for the next month for, let's say, Facebook. It's suggesting longer storytelling posts and educational content. So it's going to give me, with the content calendar, it's going to give me date, content, theme, post type description. It's going to give me a table, which is great. I haven't asked it for a table. I just decided to do that. And it's going to give me a post and a description. And I could also ask it for caption ideas. I could ask it for, to write the poll for me. I could take any of these ideas and ask it to create images around those. The paid version of ChatGPT does image creation. There are other, unpaid GPT options that will also do image creation. And we'll talk about, the risks of image. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of show you all just a quick demo. So I didn't prep that at all. I went on the winery suggestion, and you all watched me struggle with typing. It's fine. It doesn't matter if there are typos. It doesn't matter if there's, a little bit of confusion here or there. It'll work with what you give it. So, all right, that's my demo. We'll come back to this and we'll do more of this in just a little bit. But I wanted to start off with a demo so you can see what we're talking about with large language models. Now, how does that work, right? If that's your first, I'm sure that's for most of you not your first time seeing somebody use ChatGPT. But in case it was, yeah, that's what it does. That's how it works. And we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the technological journey, how we got here. But I want to be clear on what generative AI is not before we start talking about what it is. So I think sometimes when I'm talking to people who are maybe less familiar with generative AI, I get, the fear that I hear people say is that we're creating HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? We're creating a sentient being that can that's going to have power over people. No one's going to keep you from opening those pod bay doors, if that doesn't date me at all, that reference. It's right now we don't have anything like sentient AIs. Generative AI is also not an entity with, feelings, knowledge, or common sense, right? It's a computer program. It's not magic. It has no consciousness, but it's also not free of cost. It's not resource free. Running an AI model uses processing power and memory. And so while it looks like magic and it looks like it's, I just type in plain English and it spits out useful things, it's helpful to understand how we got here, how it works, so that you understand its limitations and it's also its power. Okay, so what is it then, right? Artificial intelligence, the Webster, the dictionary definition of AI, artificial intelligence is the science of creating machines capable of performing tasks that would typically require human intelligence. This is a concept that dates back, far beyond when you may think. Artificial intelligence as a science, as a field, has existed since the 1950s and arguably earlier. I mean, arguably, we've got Ada Lovelace doing, talking about a thinking machine in the 1800s. But early AI in the 50s relied on rule-based systems with every scenario, every response mapped out and pre-programmed. And that's, obviously very processing intensive and it's very limited in what it can do. It can only answer questions that it's been trained, here's the question that you might be asked, and here's the answer that you give. That's not going to, use natural language or understand kind of natural language inputs. Machine learning evolved in the 1980s with the goal of helping computers learn from data rather than relying on pre-programmed rules. So kind of skipping that, working a little bit around some of those limitations that early AI models had. And instead of explicitly telling a system how to recognize patterns, machine learning algorithms are trained on large data sets and they develop their own methods for identifying trends or making predictions. This shift to machine learning was revolutionary. It enabled systems to improve over time, to adapt to new information, and you get applications like spam filters, recommendation machines, and speech recognition that all become possible thanks to machine learning. So we had those technologies, 10, 20 years ago. And that's because of machine learning. I mean, Netflix in its recommendation engine, its recommendation algorithms are machine learning algorithms. And a major breakthrough in machine learning came in the early teens with the development of neural networks. And that's where I've got this image here. So neural networks are algorithms that are inspired by the structure of the human brain, and they consist of layers of interconnected nodes or neurons that process information by mimicking how neurons in the brain communicate. So neural networks were conceptualized in the early days of AI in the 40s and the 50s, but they didn't really start to work until the 2000s because we didn't have the computing power and the data availability and the storage space and the processing power to actually create and utilize these. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning that builds on neural networks by using many layers to analyze complex data. And that's where we get advancements like image recognition and natural language processing. And that's how that became possible. So generative AI, which is what we're really talking about today, this is up till now, I'm really talking about just artificial intelligence in general. Generative AI is one of the latest frontiers in AI, and that involves creating new content, whether that's images, text, music, video, audio, based on patterns that the AI has learned from existing data. All right. I see a question in the chat. Concerned about privacy and IP using these platforms. Is one safer than the other? We will definitely talk about those risks and how to evaluate different platforms for them. So a very fair question. We will get to that, absolutely. And I love the questions. Don't hesitate to keep those coming. So that's artificial intelligence. Generative artificial intelligence, generative AI, is what we're going to be talking about today. And honestly, the majority of our presentation will focus on large language models. But before we do, let's talk about a couple of other examples for other kinds of generative AI that aren't large language models. We will definitely share the slides, yes. Text-based generative AI is that large language model. That's your ChatGPT, which stands for generative pre-trained. That's your DeepSeek. That's your Gemini, your Copilot. A lot of what we are typically thinking of with generative AI are these large language models, but that's not the only kind of generative AI. And as ChatGPT has evolved, and as other platforms have evolved, they've begun to offer additional kinds of generative AI, like image-based. You can create images with a lot of these platforms now. There's also audio-based generative AI that can create voiceovers or music or some kind of audio content based on your prompts. There's generative AI that creates code. Image-based generative AIs can create images for marketing purposes or to illustrate, documentations, presentations, reports. Natural speech AI tools can read a script and sound like a voice actor, which can create voiceovers for video content like ads, social media, reels, educational content, all kinds of stuff at a much lower cost than actually paying a voiceover actor. And the quality is really, it's not bad, compared to, especially, even compared to like a year ago, the quality of those natural language speech AI tools has really come a long way. Code-based Gen AI tools, I'm married to a software engineer, and I know a lot of software engineers who continue to think that these code-based generative AI tools are somewhat imperfect, but they can also be really great learning tools for folks who want to learn to code, and it can help an amateur coder work like a pro. So really interesting stuff happening there, including like no-code platforms for developing websites or mobile apps, where you can create these things without actually having to know any programming languages yourself. Music-based generative AI can create soundtracks for video content or audio content. There are AI-powered features integrated into all kinds of existing platforms that you probably already use. I'd love if you've got a platform that you're already using that's got AI integrated into it. Shout that out in the chat. We're hearing, Canva, Grammarly, email writers, all kinds of stuff. Today, I do have the paid version. I'm using the free version for the demo just so you can see what it looks like with the free version. But I do have the paid version, and that's what I typically use in my kind of day-to-day work. Fair question. I also don't want to miss that there are non-generative AIs that are really useful for things like visual sorting, categorization. They're not generative, meaning they're not creating any content for you, but they're still using, artificial intelligence to automate tasks or simplify tasks. And those can be very, very powerful as well. Okay, so we are going to focus mostly today on large language models, LLMs, and that's your pre-trained large language models, your ChatGPT, your DeepSeek, your Claude, your Gemini. And the example I like to, or the kind of metaphor I like to use for these to help people quickly understand their limitations and their strengths is think about them as really enthusiastic interns. They have, maybe if you've worked in an office, you probably have met somebody like this who's early career, maybe an intern, maybe an early career colleague who has a lot of book knowledge, a lot of academic information, which may or may not be always be up to date, may or may not be reflective of the real world experiences in those fields. Maybe they don't have a ton of common sense. Maybe they don't have, they certainly have very little experience. And this is true of large language models, right? They don't know anything truly, right? They have lots of resources and data that they can pull from, but they don't have common sense. They're not going to make good judgments about what to do with that information, except insofar as you're making those judgments for them. And so what generative AI is really kind of optimizing for is making content that looks right, right? It's like very large autocompletes almost. They're creating content that is that looks like it should look based on the prompt you've given it. But it should always be double checked, right? You should always, when you're using large language models, you should always be reviewing that content with a critical eye. And we'll talk about that kind of human in the loop approach that I recommend a little bit later on. If you're seeing my floating video panel glitch, it's just an issue with my webcam. It's been an ongoing thing. I can't fix it. I know it's irritating. Just don't look at me. Look at my slides. I'm going to take one question in the chat. Or I guess two, can generative AI learn from generative AI itself? Yes, and that's sort of one of the issues, right? A lot of these generative AI models are pulling from the open internet now. They're pulling from, kind of what's on the internet in terms of content, websites, blogs. And how that can be an issue is a lot of that stuff that's out there that's been put out in the last year or two is itself generated by an AI. So you've got kind of this feedback loop, and that's when you get into risks like drift or hallucinations because it's relying on generative AI output for its training. You start to see where you're getting a little bit removed from the kind of original human experts that are what the sources are kind of supposed to be. But yes, generative AI can learn from any content that it's trained on, including content from other generative AIs. Question, what generative AI platform would I use for market research as a non-professional? Oh, I love this question. I have a couple of suggestions. And that's one of the things I'm going to actually talk about next. I mean, Jenny used your question as a segue into what can I do with it? So marketing is one of the very first ones, and research is one of the very first things that I like using generative AI for, with some caveats, right? Remember that what it's trying to do is create something that looks right. So if you ask a generative AI for market research, it's going to give you market research. But there's always the risk that it's going to invent sources, invent facts, because it wants to create something that looks thorough and well sourced. So you want to be sure that you're asking it for, first of all, very focused questions, and that you're asking the Gen AI model they're using for citations and sources, and then actually going and spot checking whether those sources are real or invented. You all may have seen some of the headlines that we saw last year around, large language models, evidence of LLM usage in legal filings where the AI had clearly brought in some case law, and the attorney filing the filing had said, yes, that looks like the kind of case law we're supposed to cite, and hadn't checked, and the LLM had made up that case. It never existed. So, check the citations. But yes, it can create citations. One thing that I hear, we work with a lot of wonderful graduate students, student workers here at the SBDC, and I hear from some of them that they've used generative AI to organize bibliographies for term papers. Here's the websites I used. Can you please format this into a bibliography using APA format? You can also say, I'm looking for more information on XYZ topic. Please provide an overview of current research with sources for future reading. And a lot of them will do that. And I see a question here about which ChatGPT version do I use and recommend for us, free plus, team, enterprise, or pro. That depends a lot on what you're using it for, what your goals are, and what your budgets are. And frankly, I'm not going to make a blanket recommendation, but I'm happy to chat with you more, one-on-one if you'd like to, kind of evaluate those choices. And I'm not even saying that ChatGPT is the right generative AI for everybody. DeepSeek is free and it's really great. So, but I'll give you some shopping guide later on. I guess is how I would put it. Can you tell it not to create citations? You can ask it to only, to link you to, to only use sources that it can hyperlink to. So yes, but that doesn't fully, it might not, the GPT might not be aware when it's making up, when it's hallucinating. That's sort of the problem, is that it's not able to necessarily differentiate between its own hallucinations and data that it's been trained on. So yeah, there are tons of articles online that compare the different AI platforms. There's lots of info like that you can find. And yeah, some people get access to certain tools for free with other software subscriptions, like Copilot comes with Microsoft 360. Yeah, Michael, that question, you are absolutely, we're going to talk about risks and ethical concerns in our next section, and we're going to get into some of those things, absolutely. So marketing, but let me get back to my slide here. So what can I do with it? Using research, yeah, you can do some really great research. A lot of these AI models have access to, really high value market research industry reports, and they can pull from that information. The trouble is you need it to kind of, you need to be cognizant of the risk of it, of what we call hallucinations. I've used that word a couple of times. Hallucination refers to when a generative AI model gets a little bit too creative and it says something that's totally off base because it's taking a creative leap. And that's, those leaps are what make it generative AI as opposed to just, a machine learning algorithm. But it can go too far, right? Copilot has a functionality where you can ask it to be more creative or less creative. A lot of these other platforms don't have that approach, but you can in your prompt say, sticking to, well-sourced facts, something like that. I like it for marketing. I like it to use, just like I showed you in the demo, I like it for creating kind of big picture marketing strategies, for creating content calendars, caption ideas. One of the things I hear from my small business clients is that, if you're doing managing your own social media platforms, and you're supposed to be posting consistently, one of the challenges can be coming up with stuff to post. Generative AI is a bottomless well of content ideas and post captions, and there are also really great out-of-the-box CRMs that have AI enhancements that can make, that are really great, powerful marketing tools. There's several out there that are not generative AI models themselves, but that use, AI technology to have, to enhance their customer relationship management CRM functionality. You can also train your own. You can train an AI mentor on your business. You can say, okay, again, and we'll talk about the confidentiality side of things, but let's say you've paid for a closed environment where you have some degree of confidence that your materials aren't going to be shared or uses training for the AI. You can train that AI on your mentor, train an AI thread on your business. Give it maybe some recent financial history, give it your business plan, give it a link to your website and your social media channels, and get that AI thread really well trained on what your business is and how you work. And then the better it knows you, the more you can kind of speak to it. And so, okay, as my mentor, what would you suggest? How would you approach this decision I have in front of me? Or looking at all of the financial hits that I've given you, how does my business's financial performance compare to others in the industry? Or what recommendations would you have for, accomplishing this major strategic goal that I have for the next year? Or what are some major strategic goals that a business like mine with my in my position and in my development might have for the next year. So you can kind of train an AI mentor to function a little bit like somebody like I would as a business consultant. Again, concerns around confidentiality, we will talk about those absolutely. For contracting, if any of you are, vendors or kind of in the procurement space where you work with large entities and you work through, RFP processes, I really like that for a lot of these tools, you can drop in a big document like an RFP. Some of those, they get quite long, and ask it for, review this RFP. Tell me if it's a good match for my business, knowing what you know about my business, and highlight the key eligibility requirements and timelines and evaluation criteria for me. And it'll kind of outline those aspects of the RFP that are most relevant to you. And then, of course, you can go back to certain sections as you're crafting your response. It can also help you to outline a proposal or to kind of punch up something that you've already drafted. So a lot of really useful use cases in contracting. In terms of operations, one thing I've had a client do is take some of their point of sale data that gives them insights into customer behavior and when they're busiest, and said, okay, here's my point of sale data and my my hours when I'm open, and here's the number of employees that I have and their availability. Please generate a shift schedule for the next 2 weeks, right? And how much time would that save? If you've got multiple employees, that's a big time saver. And there's, you can train a custom AI, you can get out of the box tools for, a lot of logistical operational considerations. But there are also tons of paid services that will train AI chatbots, on your business's customer service standards so that an AI bot can function as your customer service agent. Again, there are some risks there. We'll talk about risks when you're automating tasks like that and how to manage them. But, here are some use cases. And yes, the paid version allows you to upload images and documents, and it's very, very helpful. Yeah, I love that. Is this attached image poison ivy? That's a really great use case that relies on the ability to upload items. The RFP example that I had also relies on the ability to upload items. Question, would AI create a website for its created facts or case law? No, not generally. No, it's not going to create a website. It might create a URL that doesn't lead anywhere, but it's not going to go actually create a website, which is why it's helpful if you're asking it for citations, ask it for hyperlinks and just go through. You don't have to check every single one. I mean, in an ideal world, you would, but spot checking just so you can kind of reassure yourself how many of these are real sources. And even just, if you're doing research, you often want kind of the Wikipedia style for doing research. I'm going to read this article as an overview, and then I'm going to go down to its sources for further reading. You can ask it for an overview like that with examples for further reading, which is what I do when I'm using generative AI for research. So, okay, we talked about how you can use it, and a little bit about how it came to be, but how does it actually work, right? So LLMs are made to understand natural language, so they're easy to interact with because you're just using words, right? You can actually for ChatGPT and others, a lot of them you can even download add-ons so you can talk into the model and it can talk back rather than typing and reading. But basically, you give them prompts via typing or talking. They produce outputs, and you can use that output, copy, paste it, drop it wherever you need to, or iterate, ask for changes that you need. Okay, hey, I asked for 3 images to use for my social media post. None of them that were any good. I'm looking for something more like this, or something a little bit more this, and ask it for revisions. And that's essentially how it works. Great question here. If I ask it to generate an image, can you use that image on your website and advertising, or are you prohibited to do that for licensing purposes? Okay, so I'm going to give you a concrete answer with a big ol' asterisk. Yes, you can use that. Asterisk. It's getting its image content from somewhere. And there's always the risk that it's pulling pretty directly from an image that has copyright protection on it. So what I would recommend with an image that you're using for social media content is that you reverse image search and see if it's pulled, a photo and created a photo that looks exactly like a photo that a real photographer has used on their website and has a copyright on. A reverse image search can kind of just spot anything like that where it's pulling too exactly from its training data and opening you up to copyright issues. So you're not prohibited from doing that at all. It's a very common use case, not without its risks, and we'll talk about that in 1 second, but Luann, in general, yes, you can use it. Okay, before we get into risks and ethical concerns, which we are definitely going to get into, and I can hear people already thinking about that. I love where all your heads are at. You're not wrong. Couple of quick myths I want to just, true or false for a second, a little bit of a game. All right, so what I'm going to ask you to do is go back to your reactions. And if you think it's true, I want you to thumbs up. If you think it's false, I want you to thumbs down. All right, so give me at the first. I'm going to give you a gimme for the first one. Does AI know everything? Thumbs up if yes, thumbs down if no. And the reactions, if you haven't used them yet, are they're one of the options you have on your Zoom controls, and you can, hands up. They're hidden for you. Interesting. Are they hidden for everybody? I can't actually tell. Okay, so a lot of thumbs down coming in the chat. That'll work. Drop an emoji in the chat. Thumbs down. Okay. Looks like I'm getting mostly no's from people. We don't think that's so interesting. Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to look into what's going on there. I think it's something in how the webinar was set up. But yeah, thumbs down for now. Everyone's saying AI does not know everything. Yeah, absolutely. You got it. AI does not know everything. Worse, it doesn't, in the way that we understand language, no, it knows nothing because it isn't sentient. It's only as up to date as the content it's been trained on and any that you give it, right? So yeah, it does not know everything. Very far from it. It knows nothing. Can I use a generative AI like Google? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Again, sorry, just drop them in the chat. Diane, you're saying you're concerned when I say it knows nothing. What I mean by that is that it is not able to know things in the way that we know things, right? It is trained on data and it uses the data it's trained on, and it's not trained on every data that's, it's not trained on everything out there in the world. None of these models are trained on everything that, every human has ever known or produced. So there's always going to be limitations on what it knows. So that's just to explain my Dan, I see that question. I want to give you a quick explanation for what I mean by it knows nothing. It's only as up to date as the content has been trained on. So can I use a Gen AI like Google? I've got some thumbs up, some thumbs down. Okay. All right. People do this. People absolutely use ChatGPT and other generative AIs like Google. I have a question, I'm going to put it into a generative AI and see what I get. And Google actually now, uses a generative AI Gemini model to give you a summary of its findings at the top of Google results. I actually don't recommend this approach. I think when you are asking a question that you have limited familiarity with, you run the risk of relying on a poorly sourced fact or a hallucination. I would say stick with your search engines, and for those big questions, the big kind of search terms, and come back when you have a specific prompt or you're looking to generate a written output or some other kind of text-based content. But that's just me. So that's people are using generative AI like Google. I also will talk a little bit more about the environmental impact of generative AI, which is one of the reasons I don't use it in this way. But yeah, people do. It's not my favorite thing, but people totally do. Is ChatGPT really bad at math? Have you heard that before, anybody? All right. What do you think? Is ChatGPT bad at math? Yes or no? Not sure. Fair enough. That's a fair response. I'm not sure. That's fair enough. Okay. Maybe. Yes. Okay. A couple of other. We're not quite totally in agreement on this one. All right. So this was certainly more true earlier on in early versions of ChatGPT. Large language models, again, their goal is to create something that looks right. The elements of that they're using are words, not numbers. So early ChatGPT was pretty terrible at arithmetic and counting. It was great at analyzing data sets, but if you asked it to count the number of R's in strawberry, it'd be wrong. If you asked it to add 4 plus 10, it might be wrong. Not great at basic arithmetic. That has changed. It's been updated so that some of the major kind of tests people were using to see if ChatGPT could answer basic math problems, it's been updated to have a better mathematics engine. But in general, large language models are not really designed to be good at arithmetic and basic counting. They're really good at creating natural language, but they're not really designed to do basic math. So you can stump it with basic math facts. Will AI take all our jobs? Yes, I think you'll get the recording too. Yeah. I'm seeing a 1 thumbs down. Anybody want to take this will AI take all our jobs question? I know I'm hitting a soft spot. Okay. No's all the way around. I like it. Okay. All right. Yes, no's. Okay. Someone has to write the prompts. That's a fair point, Kelly. That's where I'm coming down. My opinion, as somebody who's, I would say, moderately educated in this space, is it will definitely change how we work. And it will absolutely be impacting employment in certain industries. If you're a customer service representative, if you're a data entry, transcription, some of those services that generative AI is quite good at, those jobs will be lost, I think. However, it also creates new jobs, and it will certainly change the way that most of us work. As I talked about with the adoption numbers, right? It's ubiquitous. It's becoming more so. I believe that the future of work looks like humans leveraging AI assistants. And which jobs we have and what we're doing in them will likely evolve, is evolving, right? Jobs are, so yeah. On this one, more complex than just true or false, but I would say not totally false, not totally true either. Is AI too complex for small businesses? Yeah, no, I don't think it is. Okay, thank you. That was my last one. It was another gimme. Absolutely not. Not too complex. You can totally handle it. All right, risks and ethical concerns. This is important to me. I really want you to, I'm not, I am a big fan of generative AI. I use it a lot in my day-to-day world, but I don't want for you all to walk away thinking, I can use generative AI for everything. I don't have to worry about any risks. It's gonna, do all my work for me. It's not a perfect thing. All right, so the big one is privacy. So especially the free versions of a lot of these tools, ChatGPT and others, they use user input, what you give them, the prompts and information that you enter. They use it as training data. Now you can opt out and you can pay for a closed environment where what you're giving it is not shared out and uses training data. But, the currency of generative AI is data, and your prompts and your input and the pictures that you upload are data. And so they're going to be used unless you are paying or opting out. So be aware that you want to never put confidential or customer information into an AI model that isn't a closed environment. And if you work with any kind of sensitive information, healthcare, health information, financial information, sensitive personal information of any sort, you want to consider paying for access to a closed environment where your prompts and data will not be shared. And you want to make sure that when you're selecting AI tools, that you're looking carefully at those privacy policies, and that you're using, if your business has to be HIPAA compliant, that you're selecting tools that can be HIPAA compliant. All right, so privacy is a real concern. Accuracy and quality. All right. This is such a great point from Juanita. I'm just going to read the whole thing because I couldn't agree more. She's a former high school librarian. As she taught students and colleagues about heavily relying on Google, you still have to be able to identify bias and differentiate between fact and fiction. And those skills still very much matter. They are incredibly important still. I would say more so in the age of artificial intelligence. They're more important than they ever were before. Accuracy and quality. All right, this is a risk. Remember that example I gave you of large language models are like a really enthusiastic intern. They have access to a lot of information, but they don't have a lot of common sense. And they don't know anything about you specifically, your specific business, your specific market, unless you tell them those things. So, would you take an intern's investment advice? Would you take an intern's engineering tips? it's a good starting place. But if you've got critical, if there's something that's really critical to your business about what you're asking it, maybe, verify some of those aspects with it before you rely on them. So you always want to review AI content for accuracy. You want to ask for sources to be cited and review whether those sources seem reputable. Basically, trust but verify. And to Juanita's point, differentiate between fact and fiction. Be wary of legal or technical advice that you cannot verify yourself. If you're going to use ChatGPT to generate legal documents, which people absolutely do, make sure you're asking for plain language legal documents so that you can read them and kind of understand. And if that's if it's a document that you're going to use a lot or rely on, always a good idea to have an actual real life attorney review it before you use it. Plagiarism or copyright infringement. This is a question we had earlier. So you can ask AI tools to cite sources. You can make the work your own. And you can use that reverse image search feature of Google to verify that they're not pulling an image, completely from one of the training sources. So you can verify whether it's already got copyright protection on it. I mean, and bear in mind that you can, what you ask it for also, let's say I want to ask ChatGPT for a social media post celebrating the Eagles' recent Super Bowl victory, and I want it to feature the Eagles logo. Well, that is copyright protected, right? No matter, even if it's creating a new image using that logo, you might still run into copyright issues if you tried to, for instance, put that on a t-shirt and sell it. So, bear in mind that, you've still got to use some common sense around what materials is copywritten and protected. Also, there's a risk of customer perceptions. Some customers are sensitive to AI usage and they will reject, if you've got obviously AI created images as your main kind of marketing imagery, some customers will reject that, especially customers that are in creative industries. They get, very sensitive about visible use of AI. Also, in written content, large chunks of AI generated language, especially if you're not editing it a ton or, giving it your own previously written work to pull examples of tone from, it's a little easy to spot. I've asked my ChatGPT to stop using the word highlight, or to stop using, there's certain kind of language, little words and turns of phrase that are very commonly used in LLM created outputs. So edit and revise, right? It's important to keep you as a human. You want it to do your work, but not your thinking. All right. And I do feel like I need to talk about environmental concerns. I feel like that's something I see missing from a lot of intro to AI conversations. The training process for large language models, like large AI models, requires immense computational power. This translates to vast amounts of electricity, often sourced from non-renewable energy sources, which contributes to carbon emissions. For small businesses, adopting, AI technologies could inadvertently add to your carbon footprint, particularly if the AI service provider that you're choosing relies on energy-intensive data centers. So beyond the training phase, the ongoing operation of an AI model, such as generating content or processing queries, can also consume significant energy over time. Even just putting in one prompt and getting an output back uses real resources like water and electricity. So, and also the hardware required for AI, the specialized chips and servers, have environmental implications as well. Manufacturing and disposing of this hardware contributes to resource depletion, electronic waste. So it's essential that if you're, a small business looking to implement AI, you want to be evaluating different service providers, not just on their cost effectiveness and on their, quality and relevance for your work, but also on their sustainability practices. Some companies are going to prioritize energy efficient data centers or carbon offset programs, which can help reduce that environmental impact. And so if you make informed choices, you can kind of vote with your dollar, vote with your business as a small business, and align with, services that are prioritizing those same things, which is, I will admit, easier said than done in the current environment. Couple of tips and tricks about prompt engineering. So prompts, like we talked about, prompts are how we interact with these large language models. So This is a very, prompt engineering 101 could be its own hour-and-a-half long webinar. But just for a quick overview, you want to be specific. You want to, I think it can be helpful sometimes to give the AI a role like advisor or mentor or banker and provide enough context to get the result that you want. Bear in mind, you can go too far. You can give it too much. It's going to respond to every piece of information that you give it. So you can also confuse it, overload it, give it too much information. So there's a balancing act. Play around with it. Don't be afraid to run something a couple of different times, just a couple of different versions of a prompt to see what you get. But you got to give enough context to get a useful result. So here's an example. Help me plan my business is a prompt I've seen people use. Nowadays, a year ago, it would have just made up some stuff about a business and written you a business plan. Now the AI models are going to ask you, what kind of business? Where are you located? You saw ChatGPT do that for me with a winery marketing strategy. So let's say you start off by saying, okay, I am an aspiring fashion designer creating my own line of handbags for sale online. This is my target audience and their preferences. Write an industry analysis for my business plan. We're going to write specific chunks, right? Instead of saying write the whole plan, just write this industry analysis. Do some market research for me. Do some industry research for me. That's, you're asking for a specific thing and you're giving it the context it needs to give you relevant output. So don't be afraid to play around with your prompts. Ask your AI about shot-based prompting. This is when zero shot, one shot, multi-shot. This is about giving an AI examples of things that you want, so it can give you better outputs that look like those examples. Again, if it's going to create something that looks right, you can give it an example of something that's right, so that it knows so that it will be a little more adept at creating something that fits your expectations. Thanks for joining us. I'll be sure to share the recording. Okay, so that's some of my tips on prompt engineering. We're going to do a prompt engineering demo shortly. Before we do, bear in mind, know your platform, right? So as you're evaluating these different options, I didn't do a comparison of one to the other for a couple of reasons. One, those things change, the quality outputs, processing time, sustainability, they change, even like the different plan tiers. It changes like week to week. So do research right now, right? In the present time when you're looking around at an AI model, and think about, the questions to ask: how up to date are its training models, training materials? Have you paid for a closed environment, or will your conversations and data be used as additional training materials? Can it cite sources? If you're exploring, an out-of-the-box AI-powered tool that's not a generative AI model, you could ask things about how much it's customizable and can be trained on your own business information versus coming, pre-trained with certain things already baked in. You can ask about how it's going to be used, about what how good is this out of the box tool at escalating things that require human attention. But be an intentional shopper around these platforms, because there's a ton of them out there. Even with large language models, DeepSeek came onto the scene. It's been around for a couple of years, but it didn't really break into the scene until it released the most recent DeepSeek model that is pretty competitive with the paid version of ChatGPT, but is free. A lot of people jumped on it, and then it came out very shortly after that launch that there was a kind of a security vulnerability, and a lot of user conversations were leaked. So be a wary consumer is my recommendation. And remember to keep an eye on your robot intern. Drift is a risk. Drift is when you ask an AI model to optimize for XYZ metric. It's not smart enough to change course if that's appropriate, or or when conditions change. You can ask, for example, the YouTube algorithm is optimized to keep your eyeballs on YouTube, right? But that means that it's going to do so by just offering more and more content that seems relevant to you. Have any of you ever like fallen asleep watching YouTube and woken up to be seeing to something that's totally not any video that you would ever have wanted to watch, but it was taking your inactivity and not changing the video as a sign that you were continuing to be engaged? That's what drift looks like, right? It's by keeping you engaged. It's like, okay, it's optimizing for engagement without factoring in anything else. So you want to always be ensuring there's quality controls for automated tasks, and that outliers that don't fit, that the AI model is not equipped to handle, are escalated for human review, because you want to keep that human element involved for the best quality and the best accuracy. So if you're using AI to create, language-based content, review thoroughly for tone, accuracy, and quality. Yeah, those are my biggest tips. For long form content, I really like to compose and edit in sections or chunks using the same thread so that the model keeps all context, remembers previous prompts and responses. There is a window, called a scrollback window. There's a limit to how far back up that thread certain generative AI models will look, and it's a larger look back window for your paid versions and a smaller one for your free versions, for instance. But still, keeping it all in one thread and working in chunks will be much better for long form content than asking just one prompt for the whole long form, business plan, marketing plan, for instance. It gives you more control. If you go section by section, you can get better prompts, and you can more easily spot the kind of inaccuracies or AI language issues that you might need to resolve with editing. All right, I'm going to take a question break before we get into the demo. I will absolutely be sending out the slides and the recording. What if I asked Copilot? Kelly, is that a request for me to use Copilot and ChatGPT kind of side by side in a demo? I totally will if you'd like me to. How can you ask to find out if Copilot is available and closed? Okay, if you have, oh, sure. Yeah, you can ask Copilot. So you could, if you, depending on the Copilot plan, if you're part of an enterprise level membership, we have Copilot through Temple University's Microsoft, agreement. So it is a protected environment because it's, it has like to Cheryl's point, it has a little green check. But you can ask it, is this is this a closed environment? Is it safe to share confidential information here? Are my inputs being used to train the model? Those are ways you can ask that question. If we pay for AI, does that mean it's a closed environment? Doug, that's such a great question. Usually, but not always. So make sure that you know what you're paying for. If what you're paying for is access to a closed environment, then yes, but that's not always true. How do you keep your queries organized in ChatGPT since the folders are kind of clunky? They are clunky. I will admit that my queries are not very well organized in ChatGPT. And that's an ongoing issue for me, to be honest. I also you can search through your threads. So I use that. I'll search through my threads to find the one I want. That's kind of my best workaround right now. I will absolutely, Cheryl, I will paste that prompt into the chat. And also, if you'd like, I can just share a link to the whole ChatGPT thread that we'll be working on in the demo today. I'm happy to do that. Okay, I'm happy to take another question or two if anybody has any. I threw a lot at you in that first hour. It was dense. So you've got great questions so far. Keep them coming. If you have to run and you have a question that you're not able to ask me, my email is going in the chat right now. And feel free to email me questions. If you haven't worked with me as a consultant, you don't know this, so I'll just tell you, I love a question. I'm a sucker for a good question. I can be very easily sidetracked from something that I'm working on. With a good question coming through my email, I will drop things and be like, oh, I haven't gotten that question before. Let me find an answer. Feedback like in the healthcare community. Great question, Renee. What I'm hearing from clients that work in healthcare is that largely they are only using models that are that have been created for healthcare purposes, that have confidentiality and HIPAA compliance kind of baked into them. I have not seen any legal issues. There may have been them, and I missed them in the news. It's been a pretty wild news environment last few months. but yeah, it's not a risk-free, I think healthcare especially, using generative AI in a healthcare environment, you've got to be careful about, how much of a patient's, confidential information you share. Um, so fair question. Um, AI doesn't deal with text well when creating images. It misspells words on logos. So you can always, yeah, this is why, copy editing is important. Because it does misspell words sometimes. Um, you can always say, I like the content. The logo is misspelled. I like the content, but this word should be spelled this way, and it'll correct it for you. So that would be a place where I would use that iterative aspect of generative AI to just say, okay, let's try that again. Great effort. I like the design. Change the word. Um, so, any other questions before we get into the demo? Ooh, okay. Yeah, using AI to actually do stuff. Okay, super great question, Zach. Zachary, I'm glad you brought this up. So we are focusing today a lot on kind of the LLM side of things, just content creation, generative AI models. Um, I think there are personal assistant AI tools that you can give access to things like um, I'm not able, I don't think, Kenneth, I'm able to give that permission with the current settings I have access to with the Zoom meeting. I didn't create this Zoom meeting, and I don't know if I have the ability to change that setting live in the webinar, unfortunately. Um, I'm really sorry about that. You should be able to still kind of highlight text and copy it. I'm just not sure why that's not happening. Um, yeah, I don't know how to change that setting while we're live. I'm sorry. Um, but back to your question, Zachary. I've used, I have clients who use AI as a personal assistant in the sense that they, use it to track to-do lists and kind of use it for project management functions. But in terms of giving it permissions to, post to social directly or book meetings or draft emails, I would be hesitant to give an AI model that wasn't specifically developed for social media posting, for instance, access to my social media channels. I would just be nervous about, again, it's a little bit like giving an intern keys to the office. I'm like, maybe the right intern who'd been around for a while, or somebody who was specifically trained in something. Um, but it's not, I think that's kind of the next round of Gen AI tools, ones that can actually do things for you. I think that's the kind of the functionality people are looking for. I haven't personally used an AI tool that I really liked that could do stuff like that for me. Although I will say I use generative AI to, make my meal plans for the week and create my grocery list and track my ongoing tasks and things like that. So, but I don't give it like my frequent flyer number and the password to my Outlook and things like that. Maybe I'm just not that trusting yet. All right, we've got about 15, 20 minutes left, and I want to just practice a little bit. So, and I am sorry that I don't seem to have the ability um, to, make the chat um, copyable. I'm not sure what setting that was. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. In the recording, you'll be able to view the chat and copy it though. The recording will have the chat as well. All right, so what I'm looking for you to do is in the chat, and we've talked about a few different examples of prompts. Put a simple prompt or react, like thumbs up. You can react to other people's prompts, but share some examples of a prompt that you would use in your business. And what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can kind of work with that prompt and iterate it. So we did a little bit of this with the winery demo. But I want to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive together. This is where I would have loved to have a breakout, small group conversation, but that's not the Zoom room we have today. All right, so this is the winery one, and I can copy that prompt. I'm just going to use this same thread, and I'll share a link to this thread here. I'm going to share the link in the chat now, which I just realized is silly because you all can't copy from the chat. But you can kind of, you can find this conversation on that link if anything here was useful for you. I want to do something a little bit different than a marketing plan. Um, so I had, you could have, oh, as a lawyer, explain, I like that, explain the attached agreement to a 5-year-old. That's a really decent prompt. I think that's a nice one. I don't have an agreement to feed it to associate with that prompt, unfortunately. But that would be a pretty decent one. You can also, I literally like clicking reason and watching the thought process. That's why I think I find myself using ChatGPT so much. So I really like it. And I'm going to go, right now I think O3 Mini is the free version. So let me switch over to the one that is kind of most accessible, um, you know, in a free way. Bear in mind, oh, that's interesting. Um, hmm. Okay, give me 10 replies to a customer complaint. Okay, so let's say I want to give it an example of what that customer complaint was. Give me 10 replies to a customer complaint. And I'm going to give it an example of that complaint. I've never had such a bad experience at a restaurant before. Service was so slow and the food came out cold. What is it going to give us? And it's reasoning, it's thinking. And one thing I like about this prompt, I like that I've asked for a specific number of replies. That gives me options. It's not going to give me it might not give me the greatest response first. So you can see it thinking. So it might, it's nice to have a few different options. I like asking it for multiple examples if I'm looking for something short. And here are the responses it gave us. And these are pretty decent. So with customer complaints, the goal to these responses, if you're applying to like a bad Google review or something, your goal is always to apologize and take the conversation offline, right? So I like that this is, there's a couple of good good examples here. They're all polite. Let's say I show empathy, take responsibility, and offer a path forward, essential elements in addressing customer concerns effectively. Let's say that I think these are actually decent. So I don't even want to iterate on them. I think that's just it gave a decent answer. Let's say I want instead to, as a customer service specialist, I'm giving it a role. You're a customer service specialist, ChatGPT. That's what you are today. Draft a training manual for new employees on how to properly address customer concerns, both live in person and online. The business is a restaurant and reviews are often posted on the Google business profile. Let's see what it comes up with. All right. So it's going to give me, an introduction, It's gonna, and you can see this is opening like a new section, so I can download this as a document. And it's got like a, a nice little manual. Um, yeah, I agree with Kelly there, Cheryl. It's possible that by asking you to explain it to a 5-year-old, that it's like taking you very literally on that 5-year-old reading level. Ask for it, at an 8th grade reading level or a high school reading level, or say in plain English. That might give you a better output than asking for a 5-year-old. But let's take a look at this training manual and see what it did. Final tips, there's examples. It's broken out into different sections based on in person and online, and it's specific to it being a restaurant. Let's say, great, but expand to cover multiple related. Great. See, that's Cheryl, that's even better an example of iterating a prompt than the one I'm giving. Okay, so I'm asking it, and I'm not even giving it that much guidance. I'm just saying, give me more. I want it to cover not just handling, customer complaints, but handle, general customer service standards. And it's rewriting completely, and we'll see how it does. Yeah, I like it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use that prompt drill and we're going to see what it gives us. So here we have a customer service manual, general customer service standards, handling customer concerns, responding to online reviews, final tips, calm and friendly demeanor, da, 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 da. And I bet you if I gave it more of a sense of the brand values of this particular restaurant, that we might even get a better output for the customer service manual. But for now, I'm happy with this. I think that was decent. And it's got this as broken out as a whole section. I'm going to start a new chat. I'm going to use the prompt that Cheryl gave me, which I think is really great. You're the CEO to WBE. It might not, let me see if it knows what WBEs are. Let's start there. It might not. Let's see. Okay. So it's going to give a decent, and I haven't given it guidance on how long I want that quote to be. So I might say this is a little bit long. Rewrite for a brief paragraph. And I might give it, a little info on what the business does. I might say the WB is a professional services firm specializing in, let's say, strategic planning, and has seen 30% sales growth in its first year of WBE certifications. I'm going to give it a fact to leverage. And now it's much shorter. So I just thought, this is a little long and it's not being specific enough. So I gave it a little bit more information. And here it's a lot shorter and it has that key fact in it. So just some quick tips on prompt engineering there. That's a deep rabbit hole that we have really not gone down very far at all. If prompt engineering is, if you want to learn more about prompt engineering, which is this kind of the art and the science of asking in the right way for generative AI outputs, I have a lot more to say about it. I'm happy to share more. There's great classes you can take online, but curious, um, I'm curious, what worked here. Do you think, for instance, that a longer prompt is always better? I'm curious what you all who have played around with this and who are seeing this for the first time, do you think a longer prompt is always better? Don't all jump in at once. Okay. Um, Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I want to start short and see what I get. More specific is better, and I think more specific and longer, often people think of those as synonymous. I think what you want ideally is is an effective prompt, which might be quite short. And if you give it too many details, you risk it's going to focus on the wrong details. So I would say, um, again, kind of like if you're managing a really creative intern with very little common sense, if you give them too much, they might do something. They might go a little bit, a little bit off course in what they do. So I recommend a concise and detailed prompts, um, and add on context in that kind of iterative process if you find that what you're getting doesn't meet your needs. So yeah, add on more prompts see what it gives you. Bear in mind that generative AI models um, divide up the language that they're given into tokens, and that there is a limited number of tokens that they can take in and use as context. And so a longer prompt might not, what that might be doing is just kind of cutting off information from earlier in the thread, that it might be using to, shape the output it's giving you. So longer prompts, not necessarily always better. You want detail and context, but only really relevant detail and important context. And that's going to give you that's sort of my basic rules of thumb. We have about 5 minutes left here. I'm happy to take any other questions that come up. But I also want to just kind of bring this back into the context of your overall business, right? So if you have not yet worked with me, you may have seen this somewhere else. If you've worked with me, you've probably gone through a business model canvas creation process with me. I really like the business model canvas as a one-page visual planning tool. I think most businesses, if not all businesses, can be kind of mapped out onto this one-page business planning tool. Google has lots of resources around business model canvas, but all I want to say is, if you're wondering about where your business can best utilize artificial intelligence and generative AI, I want you to look at that business model canvas that maybe you've created, or maybe it's been a while since you've looked at. Maybe take 20 minutes and create one. It doesn't take a super long time. And think about, in your key activities, in your key resources, in the value proposition, your customer relationships, where are there opportunities to automate tasks? Is there rote work that can be automated? Is there content creation that can be AI assisted? Is there data generated, which can be AI analyzed? Are there key activities that can become more efficient, or that can scale using AI assistance? That's where I would start if you're walking away from this thinking, this was great, but how will I use it? Go back to your business model canvas and identify some of these areas where there is rote work that can be automated, content creation that can be AI assisted, or data generated that can be AI analyzed. That's going to be how you'll best kind of prioritize these which areas of your business can give you the most benefit. I can absolutely email you a simple business model canvas. You can also find one right now. It's a free download on strategizer.com. If you search business model canvas, you'll find the website Strategizer with a Z in it. That's the originator of the business model canvas tool, and they have a free download of it. You can download it right now. My emails are going to, post-event emails can take us a few days to put out, so you'll save yourself some time if you just find it on a quick Google. All right, so here was what we were trying to accomplish today. You can let me know in how we did. Did we accomplish our learning objectives? So again, the goals were having everybody here understand the essentials of what powers generative AI. I wanted to help you identify risks around AI usage and learn how to manage them. And I wanted you to walk away from the webinar with at least one viable use case for your business. So I'm putting into the chat a brief survey. We do these surveys for all of our webinars. This one's, I think, like 4 questions long. It should take you, 2 minutes max to fill out. Let us know how we did. Was the topic interesting? Was my presentation engaging? Did we accomplish our learning objectives? Do you have any feedback or ideas for future programs? I'd love to learn more. We take that feedback pretty seriously. So let me know how we did. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be here for another couple of minutes. Happy to take any questions that might remain. And if you have questions that you don't necessarily want to go into in a larger setting, feel free to email me and we can take the conversation offline. All right, please take that brief survey. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm here for questions if you've got them. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you for taking some time over your lunch break to sit with us and learn about AI tools. Again, I'm Isabel Crum, Temple Small Business Development Center, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. All right, awesome. I don't see any questions coming in. I'm seeing lots of thank yous and goodbyes, lots of folks leaving. I'm going to go ahead and close up the Zoom room, and we'll get the recording and the deck out to you all. Bear in mind, it might not be today. It might be, end of the week, but you will get a recording and a deck. Oh, a Q&A. Great. Is Strategizer. Strategizer is a design thinking company that puts focuses on kind of business model refinement and tools like the Business Model Canvas and others. Business Model Canvas is a free download off of their website. They're the ones who originated the tools. There's like books and all kinds of stuff you can buy. The Business Model Canvas is free though. And I don't think they're an AI company. Yes, that is how it's spelled. Strategize. Yeah, I believe so. Fair enough. Okay, wonderful. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. If you've got any other questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, I hope to see you at a future webinar. Have a good one.